All right.
Mount Pleasant, formerly named Carr's Hill after the original settler in the area, James Carr, was formed in 1804 in Radnor. Over the years of development, it shifted from a mash-up of various farmers to a neighborhood. Around the year 1831, the Carr School was built. Along with this school, other businesses began to be developed, making Mount Pleasant more self-sufficient as the years went on. The neighborhood has always been one of warm love and appreciation of their fellow neighbors. But as the surrounding area began to develop more and more into the area we know today, including the King of Prussia Mall, Eastern University, and Cabrini College, Mount Pleasant has started to become forgotten. As the area around it expands, Mount Pleasant seems to shrink. Over the past 4 months, my classmates and I have gotten a bigger sense of what Mount Pleasant is and what it has come to be. Before I entered my ECG 200 class this semester, I had no idea what to expect, but over the course of the semester I have met new people, and my overall views of Radnor and our country as a whole has changed. Mount Pleasant is a predominantly black community on the borders of Tredyffrin and Radnor townships. Recently, many investors have been buying houses and renting them out to college students in order to make profits. Mount Pleasant residents who have lived there their whole lives aren't too happy about this because many of the new residents are very loud and they speed up and down the narrow streets of the community. Mount Pleasant was once a very close-knit community, sort of like a family. They would have barbecues and everyone in the community would come. Everyone would attend the same church and everyone would attend community meetings. Since these investors have been buying up property, the Mount Pleasant that older residents used to know and love is undergoing rapid change due to neighbors renting these houses and not being very friendly to residents whose families have lived in their community their whole lives. In the middle of this semester, we were split up into groups of 2 in order to discover more about the Mount Pleasant community. Each group was assigned to interview a current or past resident of the Mount Pleasant community in order to get the bigger picture of how Mount Pleasant was when they lived there compared to how Mount Pleasant is now. Students were given digital cameras and we were to write down important facts and quotes that our interviewee stated. The interviewing process was very much like an actual reporter because many students had to track down their interviewees. The final interview videos are now available online. The resident that my group member and I interviewed was Kevin Stroman, and he was one of the oldest, youngest guys I've ever met. What I mean by that was that he was an older guy with the excitement and jokes of a younger guy. Interviewing him was a pleasure as he provided a very huge insight into how the Mount Pleasant community was when he was growing up in the 60s. He provided very good details as to how hard it was to catch a bus in the area because he was black. He even told us a story of how he was chased out of his white neighbor's backyard with a shotgun. The stories were crazy and the experience was one of a kind, and to get the opportunity to interview him made me very grateful. Prior to starting this project, I can honestly say I was not very interested in interviewing people or learning interviewing techniques. But after taking my oral history seriously and working very hard at it, I can greatly appreciate the fact that I am even able to live in such a wealthy area with tons of history during my 4 short years at Cabrini College. This is their story.
Okay, Maisie B. Hall, the village leader, teacher, and role model who died at age 103 in 2006. This is Miss Maisie. An 1800 census showed there were 26 non-whites in Wayne. There were no slaves, of course. In a population of 875, 34 were black, classified as laborers or servants. Since most residents were wealthy, they had servants. People from European countries, England, Ireland, France, Switzerland, and Italians came later. They were the gardeners and they did cement work and other things. Both black and white women were employed to do laundry work. Some women went out to do it on the estate, others did laundry work at home. My mother did both. That's how I got an education, because my mother did a lot of laundry work and sent me to school.
Maisie B. Hall again. Many years ago, before 1935, when the Howard home was built, they had some houses in back of other houses. And they had one area they called Prince's Row. And the houses had one room on the first floor and one on the second. That's all the people could afford at the time. My father had an aunt and she lived those houses as a maid. Well, those people kept those 2 rooms spotless, because those are the people who knew how to keep house, even when they didn't have much of a house to keep.
More Maisie B. Hall from Barbara Bird. She's a resident of Mount Pleasant for 40 years. Maisie B. Hall is a school teacher. She had her 100th birthday at the Radnor Hotel, which was fabulous. Tons of people were there. And there was a letter from the mayor and everything. It was really, really nice. She was the first African American teacher in the state of Pennsylvania. At first, she was not permitted to teach because of the discrimination laws. She was not allowed to teach in Pennsylvania, and she had to go to Camden, New Jersey. But she was the type of person that befriended everybody. She'd bring people home that didn't have any place to go on Christmas, and that type of thing. There are a lot of letters and artifacts that we have actually captured in the library at Eastern University, and also at the Bloxton African American Museum at Temple University. She's a wonderful lady, never married, beautiful person, and what she did was she would take in students, and she would also run a summer camp, and she would have garden parties. Eventually, when the laws changed, she was able to teach in Pennsylvania. So she taught at the first segregated school, which used to be at the top of the street. And I told you that it eventually became a building for installation. Now it's a beautiful office building that was renovated. But yeah, she's a fabulous person, and she was a teacher up until she couldn't teach any longer. And to honor her and keep her legacy going, they named the park up the street, which is now a public park, Mazie B. Hall Park. And there's a garden that we built just down the street a few years ago down there, and that's because a wall fell down, so the people on the other side said, wow, we never knew this was here, meaning Mount Pleasant. So they did a big thing to honor her, and Fox 29 News came, Home Depot and Whole Foods was there, and they actually helped out a lot and put fruits and vegetables in, and it's free to anybody now.
Jean Young, a longtime resident of Mount Pleasant who worked at Wayne Jewelers most of her life working. This is her story. What has shaped me, given me character, Miss Hall with her afternoon meeting sessions. She used to have reading sessions in her house. We would come down and she would tell us we could be or do anything we want. And you just felt that way. Where you could do anything. You don't have to be a gardener. You don't have to be a maid. There are other options for you. And my mother and father used to tell us this too. Your children can do much better than what we have done. Although they've done wonderful and good things, just that we could just do anything we want. Yes. So that's with most of the kids around here today. I tell my nephews and nieces, you can be anything you want.
Barbara Bird again. There is a lot of long-term families. When you actually look at the history of Mount Pleasant, there are a lot of prominent names that come up. And one of them is the Bird family, which I married into. Mr. Isaiah Bird, which was my husband's grandfather. He owned a lot of properties and he had a business. He had a trash hauling business. Very successful man. He used to have the latest of all the cars. He would go to the third parties and purchase a house, and that party would transfer it over to him, and because of the discrimination reasons, they wouldn't sell to him. He would buy houses in the neighborhood and make sure all of his sons and daughters would have a home. They would rent from him or buy from him, and eventually everyone bought from him. So therefore, there were a lot of cousins and neighbors, so you knew everyone. And there was another gentleman who used to live at the corner, Mr. Reed, bought a lot of properties too. There were a lot of families, such as the Banks, the Smith family, and so there were a lot of different families, and everybody knew everybody. So going up the street or going down them, you had the same kind of close-knit family, because there was a lot of there's a different crowd now. You may or may not be introduced to the new people, and about 25% of the neighborhood is rental property now.
Deacon Edward Bird Sr., 72 years old and longtime resident. My father had a business, a trash business, a wood business, a restaurant. He employed a lot of people. He bought up a lot of property, and back in the 40s, late 40s, early 50s, white folk didn't want to sell to black people. But my father was ahead of his time. What he did was, there was a man named Wintermere. He was Jewish, and my father did a lot of work for him. And my father brought him home for dinner one night, a very rich man. But the way he dressed, the kind of car he drove, it's called a Studebaker, old raggedy Studebaker. You wouldn't think that he had a dime, but he was a millionaire. And my father tried to talk to him and said, I want to buy houses, but they won't sell to me. I want you to buy the houses for me, and I'll buy them back for me. I'll pay you. And that's how he accumulated houses. There was this old lady that didn't have any insurance. Her name was Carolyn Gibson. She lived on my father's property and he paid the whole bill for her funeral. I idolized my father because he had done things I'd never seen no man do.
Joe Shipman, age 75, who grew up in North Carolina, moved to Virginia, and then to Pennsylvania. Growing up in North Carolina, in them days there's a little of everything, from the Ku Klux Klan to hard work. It was when I was 12, 11, when I was 10, 11, I, grew up on the farm. It was sharecropping. And you don't know what the white people's done against you or you done against them. And the Klan would come burn a cross in your yard. And then the boss man would come around and say, I wonder who done that. But you see, they were in that just as well as the You see, they were the Ku Klux Klan. The ones you think wasn't, was. From the cops all the way down. And if you'd done anything wrong, they would burn crosses. If you said a wrong thing to the white folk, you got scolded at. You know, here and there. And it was terrible life until 49 or 50, we moved to a little place called St. Paul. And that's where I began to go to school, you know. And it was evidently too late. I just didn't get it. I guess because all this stuff was on my mind, blocking it.
This is Kevin Stroman. Grew up in Mount Pleasant, moved away, but goes back to run the Kids First now after school program at the Carr School, which is the little chapel on the corner of Upper Gulf Road and Henry Street. And he's 54 years old. I call it being a chameleon. You have to be able to adapt to your environment. No doubt when I went to Clark College, you know, there's like, why are you talking like a white boy for? I mean, you get that, you know what I mean? You have to be able to deal with everybody. There's times when I still get myself in trouble because I bring too much of my blackness, and there's no doubt a lot of white people get scared when you really start being, you're black. You know what I mean? When I go to meetings, I don't come, you know, come on now, I'm a black brother. And I ain't gonna be like, yes sir, good afternoon. But sometimes you have to do that. Yes, good afternoon, I'm doing well, thank you. You know versus yo, what's up, man? I go back and forth.
Peggy Martin, current resident of Bryn Mawr. I went to Conestoga High School. I was Conestoga's 1970 homecoming queen, which is a big deal in the area in the 70s. There was a lot of race riots in the country, 1968, 69, when they were rioting at the time when Dr. King was assassinated. There was a crazy kid in our neighborhood, and he was repeating an ad that was on the radio, and it was for Newport cigarettes. And they said we were going to have a mass revolution for Newport's bold gold cigarettes. But the people in the school were afraid because they thought we were going to have a race riot. And I remember, I was on student council. I stood up, and I was the only black person there, and said, okay, you guys, think about this. This is the ratio of the blacks and whites in the school. I'm going to stand here with all you guys, and I'm going to riot? I don't think so.
Dan Deans grew up in the neighborhood, went to Conestoga, now lives in Plymouth Meeting, sister of Peggy Martin. You just can't stay stuck in the past. You gotta move forward, and I just can't believe there are people who would want to do that. To stay stuck, to have their kids stay stuck, and give that attitude towards their children. I think it's the worst thing in the world, to overlay your prejudices and biases on your children. You've got to leave Mount Pleasant. There's a world out there, you know. It's not just what goes on here on the main line. You have to go beyond the main line in your thinking and move away from it. It's going to be a challenge for us to do that. I don't know if we'll be successful or not, but we're going to try within our own family.
Barbara Bird on Respect. Living in a house like this in an older neighborhood